Hello. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this conversation about playwriting, about playwrights. We are in a panel integrated by Lalo Mokuku, Amaranta Leiva, Finegan Krukmeyer, and Hiroki Nishigami. It's difficult to learn the surname of Hiroki, but I will. So we are here to talk about a bit of writing for the new generation. If you allow me to make some history about this subject, we began to discussing about writing for new generations in Buenos Aires in 1918, when we were organizing the fifth researchers forum altogether with ITR. And this was the subject, writing for next generation. There were writers and representatives of different parts of the world. And it was a very, very interesting and hot debate about it. There were young people, not so young people, people coming from different parts of the world. So of course, the debates were always more interesting than the conferences and presentations themselves. So we thought at the moment in coming with the same subject to the Japan 2020, to the 20th Congress. But of course, everybody knows that it has to be canceled, so that the subject of writing for the new generations become deeply interesting after the pandemic. So we have a new element to put on this. So on the support, under the support of Write Local, Play Global, and I have to thank him, Peter Kovac, for the support, and with the support also of ETR, our first partner, we are here trying to talk about it and trying to have a vision from different parts of the world that I can imagine are completely different realities. And I have to say we have lost in the way to Europe, because Lutz Hübner, who was going to be present here, suddenly realized the time that was in Europe at the moment, and he resigned. But we'll have his opinion by sure. So we hope that this is an informal conversation. We can think that we are around the table taking a wine or taking breakfast, depending on the time, on the beach. Yes, you can see my time. We have differences. Or on the beach under the stars, like friends talking about our activities. There is not a conference. We are not waiting answers from you, but only sharing worries that I am sure that all of us have it. So we can begin by presenting our panelists and their bio. Hiroki Nishigami is here. He is from Japan, and he writes plays that he performs in kindergarten, elementary schools, and parent-child appreciation groups. We don't have that here in Argentina. And he considers that the relationship between the scene and the audience is very important. He always worked with the lights and not in dark. And now he's preparing a circular play to be in contact with the audience. And he says that he likes some social themes like World War II or suicide, for example. Then we have Finegan Krukmeyer from Australia. Hi, Finegan. And it was very fun, your bio, the bio you sent me. It says he has had 100 plays that have been performed in 6 continents and in 8 languages with 37 awards. It's all numeric It's a great way of presenting yourself. And he's committed to making a strong and respectful work for young people, which acknowledges them as active audience members outside the place and worthy subjects within. This is his presentation. Then we have Lalu Moroku. She comes from South Africa. She comes and she is in South Africa at the moment. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in South Africa, so she's brave enough to be here. And she is a theater maker, writer, and facilitator, and she co-wrote Dipalo, that received the ASITES South Africa Award with the UK theater maker and writer Ginny Mankin. And she received my master classes and mentorship and wrote a full length of Sisofo play. Sisofo is a kind of play particular. You mentioned it too, or is the title of the play?
It's a language.
Ah, it's a language. Sorry, my ignorance. I didn't know that. And her research interests including translanguaging and exploring how the arts can facilitate the learning of mathematics in schools and beyond. And then we have Amaranta Leiva, who comes from Mexico, and she's a puppeteer and playwright. She's member of the Mexican puppetry company, Marionetas de la Esquina, and since 1989, and she work has been largely viewed in Mexico and abroad, and received National Award of Theater for Children in Mexico 2006, and Nobel Award for Young People in 2016. So as you can see, we have almost all the globe covered with our playwriting, coming from very, very, very different places. I have to say that I come from Argentina, so it's another point there. And I would like very much to begin with the question of the subject. Is, do you perceive, do you are aware if there are some changes in the audience in the last years, not only referring to pandemic, but also technological communication, social networks, and so could you feel in your work that you had to change something in your work, that the audiences are changing? Who wants can begin to speak. This is completely informal.
Okay, sorry.
Lalo, okay, Lalo.
Okay, no, thank you for the opportunity. I think you made an interesting introduction to say it's almost like whether one likes it or not, the change is inevitable, and it came the way it came. So, for example, I remember in South Africa, when the announcement was made in terms of all the restrictions that had to come with, we're just about we're in the process of launching Dipalo, the play that I made reference to, that I co-wrote with Ginny Manning from the UK, and so everything changed. But what had happened in Dipalo, for example, we had already begun to have conversations of how to use social media as some form of a language. That's why sometimes I do make reference to my interest in translanguaging, because in that way it begins to really break any barriers that may be brought by any power of any language. So you might find that, for example, if you're in a situation where English is a preferred kind of a language, then you find that there is social media, which gets to be a language on its own. And so I found myself that one had to really adapt to begin to be very sensitive around the language that young people also are using. And so the comfort of having the words somehow had to be lessened, because then one had to be responsive to the language that young people are using. One day I had my nephew saying, I want to go for my grind. And like, I didn't realize that he was referring to going to work. And then I was very interested to see then this medium, this language that they are using, how can I also begin to really appreciate that and be responsive?
It's a subject language. We'll go back to that, I think. The rest of us, how do you feel about it?
I was going to say that, some of the component parts might feel like they're changing, and you know, people are referencing these leaps in the internet or technology or the way that people are accessing each other and stuff. But I think contrary to that and working in opposition to that is the fact that there are some really endemic truths about story and sharing of tales and narrative structures which maintain, which kind of always resonate with any generation, whatever's happening. So yes, there are these variables and these new introduced concepts which we might try to work into our pieces, and which might be kind of access points for young people watching, certain triggers that relate to their lives now. But I think another great pleasure is this kind of enduring, I don't know what it is, like a fabric, some inherent patterning that we know about stories and life and allegory, which maintains. So yeah, a lot of the exercise now seems to be this balance of kind of working out how you can appeal and make things feel relevant to an audience today, but also how you can help them to tap into something which is far older than them and far older than us, and which will endure far after all of us are gone. So that dichotomy, that issue between the two and where they meet is for me what's very interesting.
Maranta, you can say something. Hiroki?
Yeah. Hi. Well, in my case, I was in the process of writing a play. It was a collaboration with Canada. So we stopped because we needed to be in a room all together. So that stopped. And what I started to do with my company and as a writer was to start talking and listening to children. So through Zoom and through Facebook through a puppet, and Zoom directly with me doing writing with children. I saw kind of what Finegan is saying. They needed to tell stories, to tell what they were going through and inventing their own stories in this moment. At the beginning, I thought it was very recent, all the pandemic for them, but they suddenly started to switch to fantasy, to stories of their own. And so this work for me this year has been like working with them, listening to them and helping them to write their stories. And then me as a writer, I went to my room and tried to keep my own stories, my own lines, and trying not to go into this movement of stories children have now, because I don't feel I'm able yet, I am capable of this fastness children have right now to talk and tell stories.
Okay, that's Hiroki?
はい。日本においてはパンデミック後、オンライン配信、演劇のオンライン配信がすごく増えました。
Okay, let me translate. After this pandemic happened, yes, we have more and more showing the performance through internet.
Okay.
それは、国が、助成金をものすごく出した。
And that's because the government supported financially to those performers to encourage their performance through internet.
ただ私たちはお客さんがそこにいないことにものすごい虚しさを同時に感じていました。
But we felt this emptiness because we could not see the audience. That was a bit sad empty feeling.
一方で、幼稚園のぐらいちっちゃいところでは上演がもう結構今できています。
But in the small places like small kindergarten, we are allowed to do like a live performances.
またもう一つできているのは、市民団体、子ども劇場などのコミュニティがあるチームも上演はできている。
But and also in some cities, in some villages, in some towns, we are able to perform in front of the audience if it's a small community.
なので、今までチケット制で、の上演は厳しくなったんですけど、コミュニティのところに作品が行くことはできている。
Okay, so yeah, now it's more difficult to perform in front of audience that we sell tickets in advance. So it's difficult now, but if it's a small community, we are able to start performing for these small groups.
私が今考えているのは、都市部のチケット制の演劇のあり方と、コミュニティを、基盤とした演劇のあり方、この2つがパンデミックによってよりはっきりと違いが見えるようになってきた。
So the big difference for me is that in the big cities, when we are selling tickets, that's more difficult. But for the small, in a small community, yes,
we can understand. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a big difference for me.
Okay. But I think that you all talk about stories. No, Finegan about the stories that are a basis of our life and of our theater, and Amaranta talk about the stories of the children, and now today I saw this kabuki production in the opening, that it was a completely traditional story. And I was wondering if it seems that we are very tied to stories when we consider them very important to base on that our theater. And I agree that the children receive them very well. But what happened between our position with stories and the position of the new theater, the postmodernism or this kind of theater that destroys the stories, destroys the structures, and think that it's an old theater that we don't have to go through anymore.
Do you want to go, Amaranta? Okay. I mean, I think like anything, permission has to be given for that. You know, the space has to be provided for people to push against what's always been done. There are things that I might cling to more tightly in terms of what's come before, or what to me feels like it should, you know, its legacy should endure. But I also love the provocation of somebody saying, no, throw all of that out. There's new mediums to be used. It's, you know, it's not so much the work that I would make, but as an audience sitting and bearing witness, I love the idea of a construct or a means of presentation which challenges everything in the way that I work, you know. Yeah, and so what we need to get very good at is affording space to the artists who are coming after us, to the artists who are making work in places that haven't been given as much of an opportunity to, in different languages, you know, that like the breadth of possibilities and styles can only be a good thing. And then yeah, we can be informed by more, and we can push back against more and say, no, I disagree with that. But, you know, that's a healthy ecosystem, I think.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Louise. I'm from Australia as well, and I'm a playwright and a director. So we've been developing a work here in Australia that uses 3D projection mapping to bring a painting alive. And we are trying to push up against some of these boundaries, but I still believe even within that there's an underlying structure and a story in order for the student, or not the students, for the audience to hang on to while they go on this journey. I do think that young people of today are actually communicating in a way that's a lot more visual than probably written, in terms of they communicate through memes and through YouTube clips and all sorts of other, WhatsApps and various things. So I think we really need to be aware of that and try to address, I suppose, think about addressing some of that in our work and what we do to make it relevant, to keep it fresh and to keep it alive for a young audience. So it's a fascinating discussion, I think.
Amaranta, you want
to follow up on the issue of I wanted to follow up on the issue of structure that you're talking about. Actually, what I had written for myself is some form of, I said, a formula, and I actually love it. My background is in applied theatre, and I always want to look at the notion of where the focus could always be on the actors. And then in the theatre making process, there will be all these roles of a director, writer, whatever. But in applied theatre, the freedom to actually to do is something that I think that if we are to take a leaf on the issue of being responsive, we need to actually be more explorative. And so I love it, because I found that there would always be some form of a formula or a structure that if you take it apart or we put it together, somehow it holds. In my background, there's a Cómo. Cómo is it's something like it's like a folk tale, and however it gets to be told, somehow there is some form of a structure. So in South Africa, for example, currently we are experiencing. I'm part of I've been participating in a My Body, My Space, a WhatsApp festival. And I found it fascinating because actually then the artists have tried in their own ways to find ways in which they can tell stories, but within a very short space of time. My only concern as we go digital in that way is I find that sometimes technology could actually divide us in terms of perpetuating the economically haves to the economically haves and the economically have-nots now to be at the center. So as we are finding creativity, as I'm writing, I'm always also thinking about how the audience could actually be enjoying or interacting with my work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There. Can I say, I love the conversation about story and the depth of story and where that comes from. There's a book, a scholarly book, so I haven't read it. Those who know me know I'm not a scholar, but it's called On the Origin of Stories. And the thesis of the book is the sort of founding of humanity was the stories that people were telling, and that there's this deep reservoir of stories, and how we choose to tell them or how long they are. Lalo, I think we will eventually come back to everybody live performance, but I think there are different ways to tell the stories. There are different structures, there are different use of language, but I think there's this deep root of what story is, and it's a kind of thing that transcends all cultures, whether we're adapting something we know from our culture or don't, or if we make it up, there's still, I think, that instinct in all of us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Amaranta, you wanted to talk, I think.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said. I just wanted to give this example, still working with this group of kids, that they have like, it looks like they have tons of things to say, and when you realize it, suddenly it becomes a loop. They go around the same, the pandemic, something like that, like this anxiety for telling something. So we started this long project of reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde because of the double character. And when they finished, and they started to write exercises, and I started to listen to them. They could play it like with videos or memes, this modern way to tell or retell stories. But when they had this background of this novel, they had more deep things to say. And it didn't matter if it was a GIF, or it was an emoji story, or it was a story, written story, but they had deeper things to say because they had the structure of the novel. So I completely agree that at the end is the structures that we have deep inside us of telling stories that will keep going. It doesn't matter if we use multimedia or puppets or whatever.
Hiroki, do you want to comment something?
私はこのデジタルがすごく進む時代の中で、僕自身の脚本はすごくどんどんシンプルになっています。
In this digitalizing world, my playwright is becoming more and more simple.
それはなぜかというと、体の情報を、更新し合いたいから。体の身体感覚。
Because that's because I want to exchange the 身体感覚。
physical.
The physical 体の感覚という。
We cannot help.
Sorry.
例えば、
For example,
私はこの1年、日本舞踊を習ってました。
I learned this traditional Japanese dance.
それはとても古いスタイル、歌舞伎の踊りで。
It's a very old style Japanese folk dance. It has a root from kabuki theater.
例えば、見るっていう時に、普通に見るとこう見ます。でも、日本舞踊で見るってなったら、ちょっと違う。
はい。When you look at something, you just look. But in this Japanese dance theory, looking at something is something like you physically have a special movement for looking something. で、
なので、ストーリーをただ伝えるのではなくて、その身体感覚とともに、劇を捉え直していくと、シンプルな話でもとても子どもたちと交信ができる。
So, if you can show this physical
attitude?
身体感覚。Sorry.
じゃあもう一ついいですか。
Okay, sorry. Another example.
新しい作品作りました。それは日本の昔話。
はい。He made a new story. It's based on a Japanese old story.
で、そこでは動物とイノシシとイノシシのお話。
It's a story between two boars, two animals.
ですごくシンプルなんですけど、体の情報がいっぱい入るので、子どもたちはすごく一緒に体を動かして見てくれる。
It's a simple story, but there are lots of physical movement. So kids can react to those simple movements, those physical movements.
これがデジタル時代の演劇の大事なことかなって私は思っています。
And those physical movement is an important part of in this digital world.
Thank you.
Does it make sense?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So you will say that there is not change in the stories, or the importance of the story in a play, but there is a change in the forms in which the story is presented currently. I mean, you always tell a story, but you can change the ways in telling it, or the technology, or the what do you change with that? That's the question. The story is the story. Okay, I think that everybody agrees that we need the stories, absolutely. But something have changed in the last years, or not?
Yeah, I don't know, and I was just been reminded about Ben O'Cree, that he actually argues that it's the oldest technology, stories, and for me, that's when I tend to think that basis of this oldest technology stays, but then the various forms, the how. So, for example, in my culture, the stories, for example, when they are told, there was some kind of a rule that you tell them during the night, but if you were to tell them during the day, you're going to blow horns. And that was just a way in which to maybe almost just to prevent the young people to be told stories at that time, because they are at the heart of a story. There's that beauty of relating, and that I feel that it actually does stay. So if then one would use a WhatsApp, sometimes then you might even want to impose those artificial rules, because I'm hoping that it's something that gets to really be compelling and draw you at a human level.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Something else to say something about it? No. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yes.
Oh,
Who's
I
there?
just. Am I speaking? Is somebody else? Oh, anyway, it's just that because Kim mentioned the book, and I've got this book, Story Genius. I don't know whether it's not academic, but it's really good. But it describes. It says, story was the world's first virtual reality. It allowed us to step out of the present and envisage the future, so we could plan for the thing that has always scared us more than anything, the unknown. Mm. And I think that's quite a good point. This book's all about why we are wired for stories, and it's just really lovely. Actually, it just makes you think we're doing we're doing something that is a legacy. It's part of our job. And I like that a lot.
Thank you, Jeannie.
I've written it on my hand.
Oh yeah. I'll put it in the chat. It's a good one.
You can put it in the chat. Yes, it's better than the hand. You are.
It sounds a bit more.
You are so old-fashioned, Finegan.
Nice.
Some comments about the forms in which you tell your stories now and 10 years ago, for example. I don't know.
If I did have one more thought, which is that it's about there's also this kind of, those hierarchies or structures of how a piece of theatre is made and what roles how roles sit in relation to each other. It's also a bit of a handover from the perspective of a writer, where like the play existed first, like as a script, as a definitive set of words which had to be honoured, and then the ensemble came in and worked with how they would work that out, and visual components were kind of added to the production, and this kind of one particular model which maybe gives a bit too much kudos to the writer, and now it feels a bit more democratic in terms of if we all care about the story, and even visual mediums very much, whether it's emojis or whether it's set design or whatever comes first in a piece, are also wedded to notions of story, but different mediums are coming into play at different times, and it takes a bit of the the self-importance off the writer, which is maybe a healthy thing. Like if the same exercise is there, that we want to convey something to an audience and hit these kind of innate historical story buttons in all of them, how if an emoji can do that as well as a constructed sentence, maybe there is validity in that, maybe there is equivalency in that, and that's a good thing. although it's naughty of me to say in this context.
Do you feel that we are losing words?
To me or to anyone?
Whoever feels yes or not. It's. Do you want to answer? Yes, Finegan, because you were talking about this participation of the ensemble and another kind of, not the finished script as we did it before. So what about the words?
I don't think anything's being lost. I don't think it's anything as innate or as overt as that. I think things are kind of growing from different seeds, that different seeds of an idea or a theatrical concept are being planted and then responded to in different orders, maybe. And it's something as equivalent and unthreatening as that. I think maybe kids come, I don't know, they have different mediums to employ now in terms of how they access a story or how they communicate a story or an emotion to their peers, to themselves, to their parents, whatever it is. But that isn't to say anything's taken away from language. Language endures, I think it always does. And its very endurance is kind of what makes it important, that other mediums and technologies might come and go and be the prevailing motif at this moment in time. But a sentence perfectly put, what did Stoppard say? The right words in the right order can tip the world a little. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away.
Amaranta, yes.
Yeah, I feel that we don't lose words. I think that's what I love to write for children. We always play with words and we explore with words, and because the same way children do to explore the world. That's it.
Yeah.
I was going to add that a lot of our younger audience are now experiencing art and theatre, many things through technology. And as a provocation, what do they gain from that and what do they lose in that? So I feel that is something that we really do need to be aware of moving forward in terms of playwriting and presenting stories to young audiences. There's certainly obviously no feedback loop in terms of an audience reaction when you're experiencing something online, which is a really vital part of live performance. And is that something that is a loss or a gain? We're not in a position probably to really answer quite at this moment, but it's something that I think we need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lalu or Hiroki, want to add something?
I just want to give Kim, if Kim could say something before, then I'll say something.
Okay, thank you, Lalu. I wanted to say two things.
Sorry, I haven't.
There's a playwright in the U.S. named Barry Kornhauser, who wrote a play called, it was about Buster Keaton. And the entire play was stage directions. There were no words, but that he was a playwright who was scripting this entire silent play about the life of the movie star Buster Keaton was critical that the playwright was at the core of that, even though he did not write dialogue. He shaped this play. The other thing I wanted to mention, as we were talking about design, is the French playwright Corinne Serre and I have done a little bit of work. I think Ginny might have been at a workshop with us where we've been trying to explore the dramaturgy of design and how does a designer's work not just paint the play, as it were, but help with the telling of the story in a different way, as you beat through the play. We haven't gotten very far with that, but there's a lot of interest there. And the importance of the playwright being the one who pulls it all together, depending whether a lot of words or not very many words. You know, all of you guys on this call who are playwrights are really, really important to that, whatever your methods are or your sources.
Okay. Yes.
And I wanted to just borrow from the ideas of Augusto Boal when he would be introducing writing in such a way that we actually enable different voices to come in, because then he would argue that given a chance, even each one of us can actually act, each one of us can write. That's why simultaneous dramaturgy somehow emerged in a situation where an audience member was feeling that no, this is how I feel it could be. So that opportunity just to allow us to find ways in which we could actually explore this, and also really breaking down the hierarchies, I find it interesting. And so for me, I like to give a lot of a chance for research, where I even, so for example, even use image theater as a way in which one can begin to elicit some information from the young people and be able to the word that I like to use is really being responsive. And so what could be meaningful for them, how can I borrow that in such a way that I remember that once I was young? Because I always find it quite interesting, because sometimes the young people, when they see you as an adult, they don't even think that, okay, how you got there. So I always also like to distinguish between writing with them, which is something that I sometimes do, but now also writing for, where I heavily also rely on their voices to feed me, to nourish me, to make me to be much more explorative in terms of how I could also be responsive to their plight. So right now, with the issues of mental health and the pressures that we experienced, I found that actually it's the imagination. I think like Yvette was saying this evening, yes, at the opening, the power of imagination. I feel it's grown, because even a cell phone could actually become a character, which is something that actually I hadn't thought about. I think I was also a bit too bound to what is, but somehow I feel like the situation of the pandemic has allowed me to even look at what could be. And that was quite interesting to imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, Finegan. Oh.
Yeah, just riffing off that, I think that's a really good point. And also that notion that kind of alluding to what you said with the image of the phone or whatever, that a play isn't ever wholly written. It's only like part of a play is the space between the words or between the images. And so you're inviting an audience to take these disparate parts, to take most of a story and then to fill in the blanks themselves. That's why we love theatre, because of all the artifice of it. We can see all the gaps. And because the audience does so much of the work in their heads, they're making it their story. And for me, that's part of where the emotional potency lies. And when you watch a film, you know, they've polished off everything. If it's a 3D film, they literally tell you where to look. You know, your eyes move around the screen in and out of focus as they dictate. Theatre is way, way more permissive than that. It lets you fill in all the blanks. And so the removal of some words or the adding of images instead, you know, it's part of that democracy. It's part of that opportunity for the audience to fill in the rest of the picture. Yeah, great. I like that.
Hiroki, you want to comment something?
僕はやっぱりデジタルが必要な時代になっている今だからこそ、デジタルでは更新できないものは何かをやっぱ考えてしまう。
What I've been thinking lately is that because this is the digital world, So what I've been thinking a lot lately is what the digital cannot tell, what we cannot communicate through digital, what we can do to show the kids without using the digital. That's what I've been thinking lately.
なので、子どもたち、今僕がやっているのは、今までの劇は1個作ったら広く劇を届けていこうとしたんですけど、今はそうではなくて、ローカルな場所で作って、そこで見合うという会を、作るようになりました。
So before I was thinking about more wide vision. If I make a story, I want to tell the story to many people. But now I want to make a story that can apply only to one small community. That's what I'm trying to concentrate. He's been what we cannot show through digital, that's more interesting for me.
なので、パンデミックの中で、デジタルの力でどうパンデミックを乗り越えていこうかというのではなくて、パンデミックだからもうどんどんアナログの演劇の強みは何かって考えてます。
So yes, maybe digital, you can show the performance through digital to many audience, but at the same time, I tried to think what is the strength, what the power of the live performance, especially after this pandemic. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. So it seems that there's something that I can feel from what you say that is changing, that is the play is not already done when you begin to rehearse. It's something that goes on in a democratic way, integrating design, as Kim Peter said, or actors or whatever, even the audience, to complete the play. And this is a change, I think, that it comes in a certain way with this change of theater by performing arts, which is, it's really like the space of the theater is something, not a play and an actor and a director, but something that is full of different creatives and languages, you know? The technological, the design, the audience, the director, the words, no words, and so and so. In what we, I think that what we traditionally mention as theater is changing the concept of what the theater is, at least in theater for children. I don't know, I'm not, I don't know so much about theater for adults to talk about it, but I feel that we are just in another position, not saying, well, when I write a play, I try to say blah, 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 but we are more really democratic about it. Kim, yeah, you're raising hands.
I wanted to say that in the bad old days of Asociación, in the early 2000s, what was considered appropriate was European text-based theater. Theater education was not part of it. Other models were not part of it. And the great gift that Asociación is bringing to all of us who work with story and who work with children is the gift of how people do it in other countries, in other cultures, in other methodologies, you know, that there's not just one way to make a play, you know, that there is it just, for me, it's just wonderful seeing these worlds having opened up over the last 20 years and people learning from each other and realizing there's not just one way, but there's so many ways, you know, and each of you, I know the work of 4 of the writers, including Maria Inés, you know, each of you writes in a different way. Each of you writes passionately, but each of you write partly from your culture and partly for the individual, you know, I often think that the more specific you are, the more general you are. So if you're writing about a very specific story, you know, or to a very specific person, then it becomes much more universal. But I love the universality of everybody's methodologies that we can share with each other.
Thank you. Well, we have around 10 minutes left. So if one of you want to make a closing of this meeting, your feelings, whatever you like to say, maybe just bye-bye or whatever.
There is a question in the thread I saw.
I'm sorry. Oh,
sorry, I just saw
talking
that.
about histories and places structured without. What are the specificities to write for children in opposition to writing for teenagers? It's a good question. Someone wants to answer it? Amaranta, you want to answer? Yes.
I don't have a lot of experience with teenagers. I respect the ones who write for them. I love to write for little ones, for toddlers, for primary school. I think it's different ways to explore their universe, their concept, the use of words in the case of children's and little ones. And I think and I respect a lot teenagers because for me it's like you open this portal and you have to go, and I haven't got there yet.
Yeah, I think that we're back to story, aren't we? I think it always starts with story, and we go from there. It's the best way to tell a story for the age group that we are interested in, I guess, and the themes that we want to explore. And like Lalu and our play was very definitely for older children, for young teens, 14 to 19-year-olds, because of what we were sort of exploring, and as a result of that, what we were sort of presenting for them to explore, to open that communication up. And I think perhaps I haven't written for little ones, but I presume that it's still the idea of opening up a world for them, isn't it? I imagine. You know, so I think we start with story on that one.
Mm-hmm.
I like right now I've also just fallen in love with writing for the younger ones. That's something that I would like to explore, because from the applied theatre background, one of the things that I really want to offer is the young readers would be an experience. And so I sort of like see what I've written as some form of a provocation for something bigger. And yes, the basis would be the story. And then I found that for the younger ones, there's more latitude around really blowing out the imagination. But for the teenagers, I like to nudge them to be more curious. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. So there's sort of like that kind of like a difference.
I love that idea of a provocation. Like, yeah, I think so much work for teenagers is about, you know, depression, suicide, all these very weighty subjects. And for children is so much about non-investment and, you know, fun and just play games and life is all good. And I think there's a particular provocation which can come from trying to give lightness to teenagers and weightiness to children, like kind of go against the notion of what those groups can deal with, and you know, not to break the hearts with intent of children, but just to know that they have the grit to deal with those. Yeah, that can kind of, I find that can be a kind of a fun exercise to play with, or one that's received quite well by the audiences you work for. And then for me, the most exciting is that cusp in between, like, yeah, plays for 10 to 14-year-olds where you exist on this precipice between, you have the permission and the possibility and the potent imagination of a child, but you already have these sense of real world constructs of a teenager, and to place a protagonist, to invent somebody or to meet an audience on that cusp is just so loaded with inherent drama. The drama of moving from child to adult, whether on a stage or in a real life, it's just excellent. It just makes for theatre. Like, that is a real, I think there aren't many moments in life where life is such a conundrum. It's very interesting.
Okay, well, yes, now we have to say goodbye. So the last 2 words of each one of you.
For me, it would be to stay responsive.
I'll steal Lalu's words. I think they're great. I second that.
Amaranta, Hiroki.
Me too. Very happy to be here to listen to all of you.
And I'm not one of the panelists, but being responsive, I love that too. I love listening to people, and we all have to be responsive and to open, each in our own way.
Yes, it is. Hiroki.
皆さんとお会いできてまず嬉しいです。
I'm very happy to see your faces.
今年の世界大会はオンラインになってしまったけど、いつか皆さんと直接会っていろいろお話ししたいなと思います。
Unfortunately, we cannot see each other this year, but hope to see you guys face to face. And yeah.
あと私英語を勉強します。
And I need to study English.
That's good. Finegan, you want to say something?
Oh, just we need to study Japanese. It's all reciprocal.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. No, I want to thank you all, the panelists and the assistants. Really, I think that you all, at least it happens to me, I always leave these meetings thinking something about my work and about how to change, and about if I agree or not with something you said, something moved inside. And I think that this is the value of the possibility of meeting each other. We should do it really more than what we do it, because it's always good, and we don't know how it will have influence in our work in the future, but something happened tonight here. So thank you very much to all. Thank you, Kim Peter, for your support from Brighton Local. And we are seeing around, I hope, during the Congress in another moment. See, thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria Inés. Thank you for doing this. Lots more playwriting events tomorrow.
Yeah.
Also continuing.
Yes, we have
any of a number. Lalu and Ginny are doing one.
Come along.
We're doing one on a play for teenagers. We're doing one on plays with disability. Maria Inés has a Spanish language slam. We're having a multi-language playwright slam. So lots of things happening tomorrow. So come join us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Obrigada.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.
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 Arigato.